The baby monitor was still on when I got home. That was the first thing I noticed. The little green light blinking on the kitchen counter, the kind of soft static hiss coming through it that used to help my daughter fall asleep. I'd been gone 4 days. A conference in Phoenix, the kind where you sit in beige hotel rooms and talk about Q3 projections until your eyes go dry. My husband knew I was coming home Tuesday night. I texted him from the airport. The house lights were on, both floors. I remember standing on the front porch for a second, key in my hand, thinking something felt off but not being able to name it. You know that feeling, when your body knows something your brain hasn't caught up to yet. I told myself I was just tired. I pushed open the door. The smell hit me first. Someone had cooked. Not my husband. He didn't cook. Not really. He did frozen pizzas and cereal, which is something I'd accepted years ago and stopped fighting. But this was real food. Something with garlic and tomato. The kitchen was warm. There were dishes in the drying rack, not mine. A pink plastic cup I didn't recognize. A kid's bowl with cartoon dinosaurs on it. I heard laughter coming from the living room. My husband's laugh? Loud and easy. The way he laughed when he was relaxed and happy. A laugh I hadn't heard in months. And then another voice, a woman's voice, and underneath it the higher, messier sound of children. I walked to the living room doorway and stopped. My husband was on the floor, cross-legged, playing some kind of card game with 2 kids I'd never seen before. He was fully engaged, animated, pointing at the cards, doing a fake shocked face when one of the kids played a move. My sister-in-law, my husband's younger sister Angie, was curled up on my couch with a glass of my wine, scrolling her phone, laughing at something on the screen. She looked up when I appeared in the doorway. She didn't look surprised. "Oh, you're back," she said. "Not you're home. Not welcome back. Just, oh, you're back. The way you'd say it about a piece of furniture being returned from storage." My husband looked up. Something crossed his face that I couldn't read. Not quite guilt. Not quite relief. Something in between. "Hey," he said. "How was the flight?" I looked around the room. Their overnight bags were by the stairs. 2 rolling suitcases and a backpack with a unicorn on it. On the coffee table there were snack wrappers, a juice box, somebody's wet raincoat. My blanket from the reading chair was crumpled on the floor. My daughter's name is Ivy. She was 4 years old at the time. I didn't see her anywhere. "Where's Ivy?" I asked. My husband said something about her being tired. He said she'd probably gone to lie down. He said it casually, the way you mentioned something minor, and then he turned back to the card game. I went upstairs. Ivy wasn't in her room. Her light was off. I checked our room, the bathroom, the upstairs hallway. I was already moving faster, my pulse picking up, that irrational mom panic starting to build, and then I heard it. A small sound. Coming from the hallway closet. I opened the door. Ivy was sitting on the floor of the closet, surrounded by coats and boots, holding her stuffed rabbit against her chest. She'd pulled an old fleece off the hook and wrapped it around herself. Her face was red and blotchy. She'd been crying for a while. She looked up at me and her whole face changed. "Mama," she said, and the way she said it, like she wasn't sure I was real, is something I will never get out of my memory. I picked her up. She was cold. Not dangerously cold, but cold enough that I could feel it through her pajamas, which were the wrong ones for November. The thin cotton ones, not the fleece-lined ones we switched to in October. I held her and I didn't say anything for a minute. I just stood there in the hallway with my coat still on and my carry-on bag abandoned on the floor behind me. She told me, in the way 4-year-olds tell you things, in fragments, out of order, with long pauses, that the boys had taken her toys, that Daddy said she had to share, that she'd cried and Daddy got mad, that the lady said she was being a baby, that she'd gone to hide because it was loud. The lady, that was how my daughter referred to my sister-in-law, the lady. I put Ivy to bed. I sat with her until she fell asleep, which took about 20 minutes. I came back downstairs. Angie's kids were being put to bed, in the guest room, I found out later, and my husband was in the kitchen loading the dishwasher. Angie was still on the couch. I asked my husband if we could talk privately. He said sure, in a minute. He kept loading the dishwasher. I asked again. He sighed, this small, tired sigh, and said he'd be right there. I went to the kitchen and waited. When he came in, I asked him how long Angie had been staying with us. He said a few days. I asked why I hadn't been told. He said it wasn't a big deal, she needed a place to crash. The kids had a school break. I asked him what had happened with Ivy. He said Ivy had gotten upset over nothing, kids fight. It was fine. I told him that Ivy had been in the closet, alone, cold, crying. He said, she goes in there sometimes when she wants quiet. I stood there looking at him. We'd been married 6 years. I knew this man's face. I knew when he was telling the truth and when he was telling the truth and when he was managing me, giving me the version of events he'd decided I could handle. This was managing. I asked Angie to leave. She looked at my husband, not at me. That was the tell. That small automatic look, checking with him, seeing what he'd back her up on. He said, she's my sister. This is my house too. I said, I'm asking her to leave tonight. He said, that's not going to happen. I went upstairs. I packed a bag for Ivy and a bag for myself. I came back downstairs, lifted Ivy from her bed. She barely woke up, carried her to my car, buckled her in. My husband came to the garage doorway. He stood there watching me. He didn't stop me. He didn't come after me. He just stood there with his arms crossed, and the last thing I saw when I backed out of the driveway was his face in the garage light, irritated, like I was the one causing a scene. I drove to a hotel. It was almost midnight. I lay in the dark with Ivy warm against my side, and I looked at the ceiling and I thought, I don't actually know what's happening in my own marriage. I don't know when things shifted. I don't know how long she's been there. I don't know why my husband's first loyalty goes to a look from his sister before a word from me. I knew I needed to figure it out before I did anything else. Her name was Angie. 28 years old, my husband's only sibling, and a recurring disruption in our marriage that I had told myself for years was just normal family stuff. She'd gone through a divorce 2 years earlier and landed, off and on, in our guest room. My husband, whose name is Kevin, had always been close with her in that specific way some men are close with their sisters, protective, almost parental, quick to defend any criticism of her as an attack on him. I'd never loved Angie. I want to say that plainly. I didn't hate her, or I hadn't, not then, but she had a particular way of being in my home that made me feel like a guest. She borrowed things without asking. She commented on my parenting. She had opinions about our furniture and didn't hide them. Kevin always laughed it off. She doesn't mean anything by it. That was his answer for everything Angie did. She doesn't mean anything by it. The week after I left with Ivy, I called my bank. It was a routine check. I was logging into the account to transfer money to the hotel, and I saw a transaction I didn't recognize. Then another. I scrolled back. Over the past 8 months, there had been a series of transfers out of our joint savings account, the one we'd been building since Ivy was born, the one meant for her college fund, and a down payment on a bigger house someday. I had to count twice. $94,000. Gone. I sat down on the hotel bed and I stared at the screen. I called Kevin. He didn't answer. I called again. He picked up on the 4th call and his voice was already defensive, already prepared, which told me he knew why I was calling. He said the money had gone to Angie. He said she was having financial trouble, that she'd had her hours cut, that her ex-husband had stopped paying child support, that she needed help and she was family, and what was he supposed to do? He said he was going to pay it back. He said it like I was being unreasonable for finding out. I asked him when he was going to tell me. He said he was going to tell me when things settled down. I want you to understand something about that moment. $94,000. That money had my name on it. I had contributed to that account from every paycheck for 6 years. I worked in healthcare administration, long hours, a lot of pressure, modest salary compared to what people assume, and I had been careful with money my entire adult life, because I grew up watching my parents not be careful, and I knew what that cost. Kevin worked in sales, and his income was inconsistent. I had been the stable financial foundation of our family, quietly, without keeping score. Because that's what you do in a marriage. That's what partnership means. And he had taken almost $100,000 from our future, and given it to his sister without telling me, without asking me, without a single conversation. I didn't yell. I want to say that too. I just said, I need you to know that I'm talking to an attorney this week. And then I hung up. The attorney's name was Daugh Reyes. She had short gray hair and reading glasses on a beaded chain, and she had, I would come to learn, absolutely no patience for men who did what Kevin had done. I told her everything, the money, Angie, Ivy in the closet, and she listened without interrupting, and when I was done she put her pen down and said, "You're going to be fine, but you need to listen to me carefully." She told me not to contact Kevin about the money outside of what was strictly necessary. She told me not to engage with Angie at all. No calls, no texts, no conversations, no matter what. She told me to document everything I could, bank statements, text messages, the dates Angie had been in the house. She said she was going to send a letter to Kevin's attorney and that I needed to let the process work. I said I understood, and I did understand. I understood completely. I also understood, in the way that you understand things when you're running on 2 hours of sleep in a hotel room with your 4-year-old asking when she can go home. That understanding something and feeling it are two completely different things. Kevin texted me that same week. He said he wanted to meet. He said he wanted to explain in person. He said it wasn't what I thought, that there was context I didn't have, that things with Angie were more complicated than I knew. He asked if we could meet somewhere neutral, not the house, somewhere public, a coffee shop, somewhere I'd feel comfortable. I told him I'd think about it. I thought about it for 3 days. My attorney would have said no. My attorney would have said, the lawyers talk. But I kept coming back to something. I had been with this man for 9 years, married for 6. I needed to look at him when he said the things he was going to say. I needed to hear it directly. Not through paperwork and intermediaries, not through a process that would take months to unspool. I needed to know the whole shape of it. I agreed to meet him at a coffee shop I'd chosen, busy, well-lit, 2 blocks from Donna's office. I told my friend Carla where I was going and when I expected to be back. He was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table, and he looked, I don't know how to explain this exactly, smaller than I remembered. The posture of a man who has realized he's done something he can't talk his way out of. He said Angie was in debt. He said her ex had drained their accounts before the divorce was finalized, that she had 2 kids and nowhere to go, that he had panicked. He said he was going to tell me, but he was afraid of my reaction. He said the transfers happened gradually, a little at a time, and by the time he thought I might notice, he was in too deep to know how to explain it. He said he was sorry. I asked him if there was anything else I needed to know. He looked at the table. There was a pause, maybe 4 seconds, and I have thought about those 4 seconds many times since. When someone pauses that specific way, they're not remembering, they're deciding. He said no, nothing else. I finished my coffee. I said I'd be in touch through my attorney. I left. That night I went back through our bank statements more carefully. Not just the savings account, but the credit card statements I'd had emailed to me, the ones I'd largely trusted Kevin to manage because his income was variable, and we'd agreed it made sense for him to track the variable expenses. And I found a card I didn't know existed. A credit card in my name, not Kevin's, opened 18 months ago, with a mailing address I'd never set up, which was, I realized when I checked, Angie's address. The balance was $31,000. I called Donna the next morning before she was technically open and left a message that I think she probably still thinks about sometimes as an example of a client not panicking. She called me back at 8:15. She said to forward her everything I had. She said she was going to recommend I contact the fraud department at the bank that day. She said this had moved past a civil matter. I did what she said. Angie called me the same week. I don't know how she got the hotel number. I had stopped giving out my cell to anyone who wasn't family or Donna, and the front desk transferred the call before I knew who it was. She said she wanted to explain. She said Kevin was taking the blame for something that was her idea. That she'd been desperate, that her kids didn't have anything. That she'd thought I wouldn't notice because I made good money. She said that last part like it was a reasonable thing to say. I said, I'm going to need you to speak with my attorney, and I hung up. The bank's fraud investigation moved faster than I expected. The card that had been opened in my name was flagged within 2 weeks. Kevin, when interviewed, initially said I'd given permission. He said we'd discussed it. He said I knew. The bank asked him for documentation of that conversation. He couldn't provide any because there was none. The investigation was referred to law enforcement. I won't tell you it felt good. I want to be honest about that. It felt like the end of something very long. It felt like standing in a room after all the furniture has been moved out. The shape is the same, but nothing in it is yours anymore. I had a daughter who asked me sometimes whether Daddy was coming back. I had a job I needed to hold on to. I had $63,000 in our savings account that hadn't been touched, the amount that was left, and a fraud claim that my attorney believed would recover most of the credit card balance. I had a lot of mornings where I sat in the hotel kitchenette before Ivy woke up and just held my coffee and tried to figure out how I had gotten here. The divorce took 7 months. Kevin didn't fight me on custody once the bank investigation made things complicated for him. His attorney advised him against making the proceedings messier than they already were. We settled on a parenting plan, Ivy with me primarily, Kevin on alternating weekends when his situation stabilized. Child support was set based on what he actually earned, not what he claimed to earn, which took some documentation, but Daugh was thorough. Angie was charged separately. I wasn't part of those proceedings except as a complaining witness. I was told she eventually entered a plea agreement. I don't know the details, and I made a decision early on not to spend my energy tracking them. The thing about rebuilding, and I want to say this to anyone who was in the place I was, is that it is quieter than you expect. You think it will feel like a montage, like you will wake up one day and everything will feel different. But it doesn't happen that way. It happens in small things. It happens the first time your daughter sleeps through the night in a new place and doesn't ask where she is when she wakes up. It happens the first time you sign your name on a lease that has only your name on it and you don't feel afraid. It happens when you realize you've gone 3 consecutive days without thinking about the credit card, without running the numbers, without replaying that 4-second pause at the coffee shop. I found a rental, a 2-bedroom in a neighborhood with a good elementary school. Ivy has a room with a window that gets morning light. She's in pre-K now. She has a best friend named Lola and strong opinions about which color cup is the right cup for milk. She doesn't go into closets to hide anymore. That's the thing I come back to when someone asks me if I'm okay now. I tell them about the closet. I tell them how she looked up at me in the dark, with the coats and boots around her, and said, "Mama," like she wasn't sure I was real. And then I tell them she doesn't do that anymore. She runs to the door when I come home. She yells my name before I've even gotten the key out. That's where I am now. That is what okay looks like. I don't need it to look like anything else. I've thought a lot about the moment I opened that closet door, not because it was the worst moment. There were worse ones later, when the bank statements were spread across the hotel bed and the numbers didn't stop adding up. But the closet is the one I keep coming back to, because that was the moment I stopped being able to tell myself a comfortable story about my own life. There's something that happens when you make choices that hurt the people who can't protect themselves. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't arrive as punishment all at once. It accumulates quietly the way debt accumulates. Small decisions, small avoidances, a little bit of dishonesty folded into a little bit of cowardice, until one day the total is something no one can ignore anymore. Kevin didn't set out to put our daughter in a cold closet. I don't think he thought about her at all. That's exactly the point. When your loyalty is elsewhere long enough, the people who should be at the center of your attention become invisible, and invisible people end up alone in the dark. I was not a perfect person through any of this. I want to be clear about that. I made the decision to meet Kevin at that coffee shop even though my attorney told me not to. I sat across from him, and I listened and I watched his face during that 4-second pause. And then I went home and I did what I should have done before the meeting. I looked more carefully. Intelligence isn't about being the smartest person in the room. It's about being willing to ask the uncomfortable question when you already sense the answer. I had sensed something was wrong for months. I had chosen not to look. That was my part in it. What changed me wasn't anger. Anger was there. Don't get me wrong, but anger burns fast and leaves you tired. What changed me was sitting in that hotel kitchenette at 5 in the morning with Ivy asleep in the next room, doing the math, making the calls, taking the steps, one at a time, not because I felt strong. I didn't feel strong. I felt like someone who had just found out the floor under them wasn't solid, and I had a child who needed me to figure out how to walk anyway. That's what I mean when I say resilience, not the motivational poster version where you rise like something triumphant. The real version, which is quieter and less photogenic, you just keep doing the next thing. You call the attorney, you forward the documents, you sign the lease, you buy the right fleece pajamas for November. You do the small things that add up to a different life, and eventually you look around and the life is there. Ivy runs to the door when I come home now. She yells my name from the hallway before I've even gotten the key out. Some evenings I stand there for just a second before I open the door, just to hear it. That sound is what the last 2 years were for. It's small and ordinary, and it is everything. The choices we make about who we protect and who we allow to be left out in the cold have a way of defining us more accurately than anything we say about ourselves. Kevin made his choice over and over again, in small increments, until it became a very large thing. I made mine one night in November when I found my daughter in a closet and decided that what I did next would matter. It did.